Thank you, Mark. Good morning. Welcome everybody to the Gwent Peace and Crime panel held at Penalta House in Islington on Friday the 27th of January 2023. Happy New Year and welcome to everybody to the meeting. First one of 2023. We'll start with some introductions and we'll work to my left. So I'm Jill Howells, independent member and chair of the Gwent Peace and Crime panel. Maya? I'm Kate. Oh, sorry. Go on. No, carry on. I finished, that's it.
Councillor Debbie Jenkins, elected member of Phil Grandy and his board.
Councillor Kazimi the same from Newport City Council.
Councillor Mark Spencer, Newport City Council.
Councillor Tolleason from Monmouthshire. Roger Guest, Head of Communications and Engagement, Gwent PCP.
Darren Glover Pass, Commissioner's Chief Finance Officer.
Chief Executive of the Commission's Office. I'm Kevin Constable of Gwent Police.
Jeff Cuthbert, Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Lauren Thomas, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Gwent.
Jacqueline Thomas, County Borough Councillor for Gwent. Dean Hallhead, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Gareth Davies, Gwent County Borough Council.
Tony Keir from Monmouthshire Council.
Linda Clarkson from Torvine Council.
Scrutiny Officer, Caerphilly County Borough Council.
Axel South from the Lead Office to the panel.
Thank you very much. Just to follow up from the last meeting, we did a card and a election for the previous and people and I have everything called from him. So pleased to have received that and to just appreciated the thought and the question. So thank you for those that contribution. Moving on to the agenda now, then the first item is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest in respect to today's meeting? Thank you. Apologies for absence. We have one apology for absence this morning from Councillor Colin Mann. Do we have any other apologies? No. Agenda item 3, the panel held on the 16th of December 2022 to approve and sign the following minutes. We'll take them page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5. Issues now? Could I someone to move the minutes? Thank you. All in favour? Thank you very much. We have agenda item 4, questions for the Peace and Crime Commissioner for Gwent. There are no questions for today's meeting. Members are reminded, if you do have any questions to submit for that agenda item, to put them in writing to Kath 3 weeks prior to the next meeting. That gives the PCC the opportunity to reflect on the question and to be able to provide us with an informed response to the meeting. Moving on then to today's main agenda item 5, which is the Peace and Crime Commission proposed budget requirement and council tax reset proposal for 23-24. I'll hand over to the Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. And can I wish you too a happy New Year. Just before I get into this report, I just want to remind people that today is National Holocaust Day, and under normal circumstances, myself and my colleagues and Gwent Police would be attending various events across Gwent to help mark that. I have issued a press release about the day and the importance of anti-racism work that we're fully engaged in. And there is an appeal, I know, for people to light a candle in their windows for 4 o'clock this. So, moving on to the formal purpose for me being here, I intend to deal with this in this way. You've all, of course, received a detailed financial analysis from Darren, my CFO, and he will be answering questions on that. I'll be starting by giving an outline of how I think the report should be viewed in terms of the societal, political and economic context that Gwent sees itself in at this point. It is not a repeat, I must stress. I'm not going to go through Darren's report and just read that out. You'll be relieved to hear that. That would take too long. And you've already read it, so you'll have questions on that. We'll then take questions on what I say and the report that you have before you, and Darren in the main will be dealing with that as much as you can. So, and with your agreement, Chair, invite Pam Kelly, the Chief Constable, to reflect on what's been said so far, and no doubt to link it into what she said to us a month ago. Darren may wish to summarise the situation as he sees it based on the questions that have been put, and then we will withdraw to allow you to consider in private your response to our bid. I hope that makes sense. So, in terms of my presentation, this is the 7th Gwent Police budget that I have proposed to this panel since I was first elected in 2016. It is also the most difficult due to the real impact that the cost of living crisis is having on communities and families across Gwent. Now, as Commissioner, I'm elected by the public to be their voice in monitor performance, gather the views of Gwent residents, and support and challenge the Chief Constable on the delivery of my police and crime plan for Gwent. This is a duty that I take very seriously. However, to perform at an optimum level, organisations need to be resourced at an optimum level. Here's the tension. In addition to holding the Chief Constable account, I am also responsible for ensuring that the Chief Constable has the resources that she needs to keep our communities safe. This is always a challenge, never more so than this year. When I begin this process every year, affordability needs to align with demand. The financial balancing act, one made more difficult year on year, real-term funding from central government drops and local council taxpayers contribute more. Indeed, in a few years' time, the precept from local council bills is the largest contributor to Gwent Police's budget. With this in mind, residents' ability to pay has to be front and centre in my decision-making. Across the country, the cost of living crisis is hitting high. 40-year high inflation is driving a perfect storm, affecting people's ability to pay for food, fuel, and essential services. This is well publicised. Just last week, it was announced that inflation is currently running at 10.5%. When speaking with residents, it is clear that the biggest challenge and the biggest concern currently facing people is, of course, this cost of living crisis. Many people, household finances are at breaking point. Interest rates, staggering increases to energy prices, and the long-term effects of Brexit, the pandemic, and Putin's senseless war in the Ukraine are becoming more and more evident. With these factors, many difficult decisions lie. And here's the tension. Policing is not immune to these challenges. We too have seen our transport costs rise significantly, our energy costs driven up to the unprecedented levels. No level of financial planning could have prepared us for the turmoil facing our budgets and for the cost crisis hitting services across the nation. Unprecedented times have unfortunately followed unprecedented times. Through all this, demand has continued to rise while the deficit in our budgets continues to increase. As I said, this is the 7th budget that I have proposed to this panel since I was first elected in 2016, and it is certainly my most difficult. Last month, the Chief Constable spoke before panel members, laying out a compelling case for why she requested £171.4 million. This request followed months of work between her office and mine to understand demand, pressures and risks. Now, let me be clear. This is a budget submission based on the requirements of Gwent Police to protect and reassure people. It's what the Chief Constable believes she needs, not what she would like. A must-have list, not a wish list. Through my police and crime plan and the Chief Constable's force delivery statement, the challenges facing Gwent Police are clear. I want to reassure panel members and the public, in close collaboration with the Chief Constable, I am committed to ensuring that Gwent Police is equipped to respond to the challenges of both today and tomorrow. Now, whether it's talking to frontline officers, working with the Chief Constable's Chief Officer team, or engaging with residents across the length of Gwent, the scale of the challenge facing policing is clear for me to see. I want to stress these challenges are not limited to Gwent. In my role as the chair of policing in Wales and as the joint local policing lead for the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, I am constantly exposed to the stark reality of policing today. Indeed, many of the issues facing policing today are a result of years of austerity and its impact on public services. Budgets have been decimated, resources dwindled, services stopped. I've heard this time and time again when speaking with our fellow residents, and here's the tension. More often than not, policing picks up the reins where other services cannot. Nowhere more can this be seen than the impact the pandemic has had on the mental health of people across our villages, towns and cities. The officers that protect you deal with 42 incidents involving mental health issues every single day. The officers that protect you also spend 50 hours with people in A&E every single day. The officers that protect you also help enable other public services to deliver for those who need them. Partnership working is essential. In Gwent, we have a team of officers who selflessly serve communities with multiple and complex needs. One of the things we deal with are policing issues, but many, however, are not. Indeed, the service shows that approaching 50% of all calls to 101 which the police respond to are not policing matters at all, but for other partners. It's your policing service that plugs the gaps. You're a community police force. However, regardless of responsibilities, all of these services come at a cost: time, money, and resources. It's been a challenging year for us here in Gwent, and indeed it's been a challenging few years for policing generally. In my eyes, the effort and commitment of our officers has never been in doubt. And the value that our residents, our communities, our businesses place in local policing has never been in doubt either. When I speak to residents, communities and businesses, overwhelmingly, they tell me that they have a positive view of Gwent Police, with the majority rating them as excellent or good. When I speak to members of the public, they often tell me that they want to see more police officers, not fewer. And it is with some pride that I can tell them that there are now over more than 360 additional police officers in Gwent, 50 additional PCSOs than when I first took office. However, when I became commissioner, officer levels were at an all-time low thanks to the devastating impact of austerity on public services. I've spent the last 7 years returning police officer numbers to pre-austerity levels, and I'm proud of this. I know the Chief Constable is deeply grateful for this investment, as are our communities across Gwent. When I speak to residents in the communities they live and work, they overwhelmingly tell me that they want to see more policing, not less. Daily demand continuing to rise and the complexity of crime increasing, policing is regularly plugging the gaps caused by cuts and underfunding in other public service areas. Our frontline officers regularly face danger, dealing with situations on a daily basis that most people will never have to experience in their lifetime. By and large, the public is greatly appreciative of this service. Regularly hear stories of incredible bravery, abnormal acts of courage by normal people. While the nature of many of the investigations and the criminal justice system mean that we are limited, as we often can say, this work never goes unnoticed. Sometimes we even get to publicly recognise such heroic actions. Take the case of Sergeant Menna Watkins, for example. She was shortlisted for a National Police Bravery Award after she subdued and arrested a knife-wielding attacker. Sergeant Watkins was able to subdue and arrest a violent offender who presented a very real threat to her personal safety and other members of the public. He displayed fantastic professionalism, calmness under pressure, and courage, as all our frontline officers do every time they start a shift. She put herself at risk to protect the lives of others. To you and me, it's an abnormal act of courage. Menna and her colleagues, it was a normal. This is just one example of the over 1,500 police officers that protect you, as well as the 850 staff members and the 102 PCSOs who enable them to do their job. Police officers that protect you respond to 47 domestic abuse incidents every single day. Police officers that protect you make 24 arrests every single day. Police officers that protect you deal with 11 cases of missing people every single day. These are the same officers that everyone relies on in a time of need. Their work is important. Their contribution to feelings of safety and confidence is unrivaled. Of course, policing is much more. As the Chief Constable told you last, policing is also our traffic teams, the order officers. It's the people who answer your 9-point calls and who answer your 1. Police officers that protect you also help safeguard vulnerable residents, child abusers. They disrupt criminal exploitation of children. Police officers that protect you help to counter terrorism, tackle cybercrime, and they deal with the scourge of serious organised crime and its impact on our communities. Now, this work is not often visible to us as members of the general public, but these are essential functions. High risk, high harm. The most vulnerable residents need protecting, and those who look to exploit them need prosecuting. I was researching my second police and crime plan. I specifically spoke to residents at length about these issues and the importance policing should place on them. The feedback was overwhelming. The greater the harm, the greater the focus people believe that the police should put on it. There's the tension. All demand keeps going up. And police receive 466 of incidents every single day. And police typically deal with about 240 999 calls and 360 101 calls every single day. And police typically deal with 5 sexual assaults, 16 violent crimes, and manage more than 850 registered sex offenders every single day. These are only a fraction of the bigger picture, but they require no small effort. Efficient, effective policing needs time, money, and resources. The public understand this. While most of these issues don't affect the majority of our residents, that doesn't diminish their importance in the public's eyes. The bigger picture described is only expected to grow as the cost of living crisis is likely to exacerbate many of the factors driving these behaviours. Cost of living crisis has also reinforced the need for value for money and for all public services to maximise every pound that they receive. Overwhelmingly, people tell me that they don't mind paying more for public services, but many want to see improvement. They want to see investment. Despite the financial challenges of the last decade, I'm pleased to say that we have substantially invested in areas across the force, not just in the additional frontline officers and CSOs. The most visible investment that panel members would have seen is our We Don't Buy Crime team, a new-ish initiative focusing on tackling acquisitive crime such as burglary and theft. We Don't Buy Crime has been used by some forces in England to successfully reduce repeat offending and victimisation. I've been out with local officers in all 5 counties of Gwent to speak to people and businesses about the initiative and how it can help them stay safe. Since the launch, more than 4,000 smart water packs have been distributed, 15,000 acquisitive crimes reviewed, more than 1,000 vehicles marked, and £150,000 worth of goods recovered. And each and every interaction with the public has helped to protect and reassure them. Last month, the Chief Constable told you about how we have invested £600,000 in safeguarding hubs in each local authority, dealing with early intervention and safeguarding issues in our communities. We invested also in body-worn video, tasers for officers, investigation hubs. We've created a rape investigation team to help protect some of our most vulnerable victims and launched a high-tech crime team to tackle the growing demand of online harm. When I speak to residents, businesses, elected representatives in all 5 counties, time and again, I hear firsthand from those who have benefited from these investments, those whose missing children have been found, residents whose communities are now safer thanks to our officers, victims who are able to move on with their lives thanks to the support they have received. Now, Gwent Police responded to 170,000 incidents last year, recording 53,000 crimes, all time-consuming, all incredibly important. Continuing economic uncertainty, particularly in relation to funding for public services, the future financial position for policing remains uncertain and extremely challenging. Daily demands are growing, costs are rising, and the money available to protect communities is shrinking. Only one funding stream is within my power to address. Over here today. I want to mention my formal public engagement through the year here, as this reinforced to me all the issues, challenges and risks I've considered when putting together this proposed budget. This was a long process, starting back in June with our summer events programme and continuing through the autumn and winter months. Such a sustained engagement allows me to test the pulse of the public consistently throughout the year, which is reflected in the amount of people who had their say both online and particularly face-to-face. Our formal budget setting programme of engagement began in October and ran for 11 weeks. It had a major focus on face-to-face engagement in communities, and in total 23 face-to-face events were held across all local authorities. During 144 hours of engagement, I spoke to more than 1,300 people, with 361 people completing the survey as a result. An additional 806 people had their say via the online survey. In total, 61% of the 1,167 responses favoured one of the proposed increases in precept. In addition to this budget survey, it is important to note that my office and I also worked on budget questions during our summer engagement work. This was based on financial predictions at that time, and therefore only asked about £15 per annum. More than 1,000 people asked this question, with 54% of people supporting this proposal and 16% unsure. I want to stress that during all our work in Gwent's communities this year, we have heard from thousands of residents about the realities of living here in Gwent. Effects of years of underfunding in areas such as health and social care is clear. However, the financial picture of Gwent Police is also plain to see. Police forces have had significant cuts to their government funding since 2010. By the end of this financial year, Gwent Police will have made nearly £54 million in savings in this time and must save almost £25 million more by 2027 if we're to balance the books. Attention. To do this, our medium-term financial plan tells us that a rise in the council tax precept of at least £25 per year for an average Band D property is needed for Gwent Police to attempt to maintain current service levels for the next financial year and beyond. You will have seen the level I am proposing today, through the report that Dan has given you, is less than that, with the difference being made up from reserves. I believe this is acceptable in the short term. However, I also believe that in the long term, the Home Office must provide significantly more funding for policing to meet the exceptional costs, we now face to maintain service delivery. The proposed budget before you today includes a precept increase of 6.82% for 2023-24. This is an additional £20.72 per year for the average Band D householder in Gwent, or roughly £1.73 extra per month. This proposal supports the budget request from the Chief Constable and, over the short term, will allow us to maintain the investment we have made in additional police officers since I was first elected. It will also allow us to continue to support the infrastructure for the additional 206 police officers being recruited through the UK Government's Operation Uplift programme. Importantly, however, I need to stress that the proposed level of precept before you will not set a balanced budget in 2023-24, even after taking into account nearly £4 million of cashable efficiency schemes and budget reductions. And then will be a recurrent shortfall of nearly 3.5 million will need to be either risk managed during the financial year, delivered through further cashable efficiencies, or met from reserves and committed funds. This proposed budget also places a further burden on future borrowing in order to fund the estate strategy within the current capital programme and heightens the risk of exposure to negative fluctuations in interest rates. However, in light of future significant borrowing required to deliver the next phase of the estate strategy, a review was undertaken last year to realign operational policing and the public's requirements. The draft findings of the review were presented to me last week, and my estate strategy is being revised based on affordability. This is partly reflected in today's papers. I would like to put on the record that I'm extremely thankful to the panel's Finance and Estate Reference Group, who have met twice since December and have been briefed on the overarching financial plan and estate strategy. As I said, this is the 7th budget that I have prepared, and it is definitely the most difficult. I want to reassure panel members that before I submitted this budget report to you, I carefully, methodically evaluated what the Chief Constable says when police need to operate an efficient and effective service, how we collate a balanced budget, including the level of precept and, crucially, the affordability for local residents given the cost of living crisis. Affordability needs to align with demand. I also want to reassure panel members here today that the proposal before you will allow Gwent Police to maintain current police officer and police staff levels. Both the Chief Constable and I are committed to this. And, as we have previously committed, we will also create 10 additional police community support officer posts this year to work in our communities. This is part of our ongoing plan to invest in police community support officers, growing numbers from 172 today to 222 over the next few years. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind panel members that last month, Constable laid out a compelling case why she has requested £171.4 million from my office to deliver services to the people of Gwent. I believe that the proposal here today is a must-have list, not a wish list. I believe that the proposal before you is an honest budget, balancing the needs of the Chief Constable and that of affordability for the public, while minimising any impact on frontline service delivery. I believe that anything less than my 6.82% increase proposal jeopardises the Chief Constable's ability to protect and reassure the people of Gwent. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want any other officers to come in before we open up for questions? You're happy
No, I'm
to
quite
take
happy for questions to come now, and as I said, especially on the report by my Chief Finance Officer.
Okay. Some panel members have submitted questions, but also there's still the opportunity for people to ask questions based on what they've heard today. The first question actually you've covered, which was about the assurance that you could provide the panel in terms of you have reviewed the budget and you feel that it's been rigorously tested. So thank you for addressing that point. We're going to try and take them pretty much in order of the report as we can to stay flipping around, but that's the best way we'll go. We'll start that way and see how it goes. So I'll pass over to Tony Keir for one of the first panel questions, please. Councillor Keir.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you very much for that very detailed report there. And I also wanted to thank everybody who's been involved in the process. As a new member to this committee, there's a lot of catch-up to be done for myself, and I don't know what else is new, but there is a lot to understand. And this report has been well trailed by the Commissioner last month, and by the Finance Committee, and by the Estates Committee. With looking at the operational needs, I would say it's very, all your reports have been passionate and well thought out, so I thank you for that. My question is around the size of this report and the limited time that we as members have to consider it. You've spoken there, Commissioner, of the amount of time it's taken to put it together. This document is dated the 20th of January, and today is the 27th of January. My background, I'm used to looking at complex finance, multi-million pound companies. I'm used to looking at reports like this. I would argue that I struggled with it, and I appreciate that it is a very well detailed business case to put forward for the rise that you have. There are members of the public involved in this process on the committee, lay people as well as councillors. I don't know what members are, but I would argue, and I was concerned that this is pretty complicated. For me, I've struggled with the time to understand it and to come to a reasonable decision as to whether or not financial implications are acceptable. From what I've heard from the Commissioner, my concerns are you've spoken about the financial pressures, even within this budget, the financial pressures that are going to occur during the year, because as we know, it's not fact that what you put in here is going to happen. I don't think it's one for now. I want to say once again thank you for such a detailed report. What I would argue, Chair, is that I do think this process needs to be reviewed. The summary document, which is what I would used to be seeing, completely only one page. That headline ought to grab everybody and say everything. But I don't know, it's taken me at least 3 hours to get through this, and I kind of understand it, and I think, that's probably good go. So, in terms of my specific question, in the order that they're coming on here, I would ask that somehow or other, as a panel, we review this process. But I don't wish to in any way diminish. And once again, thank you for the huge amount of work that's gone into this. It's been highly informative for me. And as a public document, again, members of the public picking this up, it's online. Read it.
And I think to address that point, we did have the opportunity, and that's one of the reasons why we developed the finance group. I think it's good. We've got so many new members. We've got a fresh pair of eyes. And I think we've probably got used to it. We know which points to take, and I think it's an excellent point raised. We have talked about approaching the other Welsh panels to see what reports they use. And I think if we can engage going forward to be able to look at how the presentation comes. Yeah. Any comments from other members on that particular point?
Right.
Do you want to take a response to that then?
Yeah, it's a very fair point, and I have no objection whatsoever to a review of the process. Perhaps in consultation with the other three panels, no problem there. There are certain constraints around the timeliness of the reports.
I accept that.
Both in terms of legal issues and also the unpredictability of the situation we're in, and wanting to ensure that the information we're giving you is as up to date as we can possibly make it, and that we do accept, and I'm very conscious of the fact that many members of this panel are new and won't be used to it. I think it's fair to say this report is actually 10 pages shorter than the one last. So there we are.
Thank you, Brian.
I'm not trying to be funny there, but it's just to be as fair as I can be. But certainly, I hope that I've outlined that we cannot be sure of the financial picture going forward because there are so many at this point. That's just for me. I guess the brushing of things very important. To earn anything.
Fully supportive of the proposal, Councillor. As the Commissioner's outlined, it's not fast because the provisional settlement comes out in late. We started this journey last year with remedying the complexity. The avenues we went down previously, in more kind of presentation throughout the year, some of a build-up. Perhaps from the June, because we do the first iteration of the medium-term financial plan in June. We've got a couple of bites at June, September, December to try to get through the try to see the wood from the trees, if you will. But certainly would welcome working with the finance subgroup, this well, the joint finance estate subgroup through the remainder of this year to refine. I spoke to the chair earlier. There's 43 different versions of this report. They go to 43 different sort of pieces of frying pan, and they all differ. Certainly will work to a product that actually makes your decision more transparent and more timely. So really welcome working with the we'll pass that to those members to work with.
Councillor Clarkson.
Going back to the point about as well, now they produce easy read versions of their reports. It makes it more accessible for members of the and for councillors and anyone else that's involved in the process. Would that be something that's possible? I have been asked about the priest already by a few. It's difficult to summarise it. If I could point them in the direction of something.
Yeah, thank you. Introduction. Thank you for your complex report. I concur with Councillor here that the report is complex for not for bedtime reading. The only benefit we can have as a group is that we may pick up different aspects of the report individually to bring them forward. And do really I see is the questions for Darren, where we see there may be opportunities to savings, for example. Increase the next year, they're coming down. That might not be relevant in this report going forward. But I think a group of individuals who are not financially but not financially up to going through these reports we can add resilience. So you're looking to build a report, whereas we're looking to try and find savings. That's a difference right here.
To what stated about the public consultation, that there's a simplified. What I was going to ask if it was more simplified, but I've already been told that no, there isn't a more simplified version for the members of the public, so they can easily understand it. Yes, and are the members of the public given this exact report that we get?
No, just for clarity.
More simple, and does it point out exactly what they get for the
Can you talk about the survey questions we ask? So that's what I'm typically doing. So when we run the format in October and January, the way we do that is probably a one-page simple read, run the comms team, a one-page simple read of the contextual piece around the finances. We'll talk about austerity, about future inflationary pressures, etc. But very much on a page. Right. And then that leads into the questions. We run the scenarios based on options of precept increase. So it's no, don't get a huge. We talk about deficit. So what we boil it down to is level of precept to propose in the future will level of deficit. Very simple.
So it goes from one
extreme to the other. Could be, so there's a middle ground perhaps, but we do a bit more. We did entertain the fact 3 or 4 years ago, running a series of public engagements. So during December and January, right in that kind of eye of the storm, if you will, we organised 3 external engagement events where it would be a commissioner and CFO-led presentation. So a bit more that middle ground, a bit more detail, and nobody signed up to them. I don't know whether that was my name preceding me. They didn't like it preceding me, but very much. I think you're right. We've tried because otherwise you have a very detailed what I call the CFO State of the Nation report, and then we have during the survey because it's more about bringing people to be engaged. What is really important though is Rod's team does the face-to-face consultation. As we have, the online survey has a page of context and a number of questions. When Roger and the comms engagement team go out to do their 20+ engagement events which complement the online survey, that's when they get that real flavour and engagement piece on the question. So it's not just a question set, it's a conversation piece. And we get significantly more value out of those. I think it was 23 engagement events this year.
Yeah, yeah.
New disservice, but
We get a chance to be for qualitative data to be collected.
About what we do, because obviously there's quite a few new members. So we do 4 planned in each county borough. So that's three in the week, one on the weekend in each area. And then if we're invited to additional community events, we attend them as well. So we all the local authorities the same. We did 23 events this year. That's about 144 hours speaking to people. We also ran the budget question through the summer events as well. So 110 people, 1,010 people answered the question in the summer, and 1,167 people through the winter, which would be the largest total we've ever had engage with us. We actually speak to significantly more people than that. There's about 730 people as a direct result of a face-to-face engagement. Spoke to, and this will be figure about 1,000 people across, but that includes all the summer events. And I think it's worth noting that this year we saw a significant movement in sentiment and mood when we were out and about. Last year was the first year that we were 50% yes. We're out and about. So there was a much more positive feel. And we also do it, we don't just do the survey, we're also doing lots of other things. So we're giving crime prevention advice, we're signing people to channels, we're doing referrals to Connect Gwent, we're highlighting, not solely just out trying to get a survey done. It's that reassurance to members about it not being a tick box exercise, because out all the way through November and December in the cold, doing this work. With the team and I feel very strongly that it needs to have purpose and that we need to be having conversations through that. So over the last few years, we've actually, each engagement takes longer because the actual quality of data that we're collecting is better and the conversations is better and the reassurance we're giving to residents is better. And then we flag up any issues then back to the Commissioner in his role of holding Gwent Police to account as well. So that's on the Chief to account. So that's a little overview of
Thank you.
Back to me already. My specific question here is relating to the delaying of projects. We found out pre-meeting that the GPOF has been, and that wasn't a surprise to me. Constable spoke at the meeting previously about efficiencies and the effectiveness of the estates, and certainly wrote down a comment here that Newport, 4 years left, it's not fit for purpose. You need to invest in the estate, make the force more efficient and effective. What you're saying, that was the point of that I picked up. Then that leads on to me with my financial hat on is estate affordability, and there is an investment which you have to pay for, and that efficiency which ultimately could bring cost savings. So my specific question, bearing in mind, let's put the financial simplicity. You've got income and expenditure. You know ballpark what your costs are, what to do. You know ballpark where your income is going to go, and you've told us what you can and what you can't cut. Basically, the police officers. But the plan here is if we carry on this direction, we're going to run out of money. That is the very simplistic thing that we're being looked at here today. We're asking to vote on a plan which has got uncertainties, a level of direction, unless there is this change Home Office about investment, we're going to run out of money. So the specific question I had there was, understandably delaying projects, financial reasons, what are the effects on operational efficiency that you now have to face? What ultimately are the financial implications, decisions that you made?
Obviously, the chief will need to respond for the clarity. The estates, that is the mortar, the bricks, the building itself is part of my portfolio and decision on whether we go ahead with building projects is a matter for myself. How they're used, of course, is a matter for the chief constable in terms of operational planning. Of the issues about the deferment of GPOF, police operating facility. If I got that right, I think I have. We'll have to change it now. I am sure that we're pursuing the right principles in getting everything ready to press that green button. But for the financial reasons you've just outlined, we are deferring a start date until, which I referred to in my opening remarks, until the financial situation and interest rates are more favourable.
I'll just give the finance, the lesser impact, if you will. So you recall there was three drivers predominantly, financial drivers for the or financial potential opportunities. So the first was deflation in the construction industry. So we've seen incredible inflation in the construction industry. Interesting on the news this morning about impact on HS2, might not go all the way to London now because of the inflation seen there. So there's a piece around global recession, potential deflation in the construction industry. I'm really grateful for Council here sort of angulated my proposal there. So deflation. Secondly, we're at a upward trajectory on interest rates. So 3.5%, possibly peaking at 5% during this year, next 18 months. Perhaps 2 year, hit a pattern for 2 years, then come back down. So deferment may A, see deflation in the construction industry, B, see a steady state interest rate. So when I borrow, I'm borrowing at a steady state because we borrow about 1.5% per base. So if it's 3.5, I'm borrowing 5. They go for 2, they come back up to 3, and I'm saving. And the third push was simply cash flow. So by deferring the GPOF by 2 years, I halved the borrowing need next year and therefore halved the interest payments next year. So it took £1 million out of the budget. So that decision immediately saved £1 million of that. Reserves we need next year to be 4.5 million. You're absolutely right, though. We're not the only police force in significant. It's across public service. To that end, we wrote to the Home Secretary back in November outlining the fact that a development that initially was estimated to cost £36 million 2 years ago has now gone to £64 million. So I've got cost inflation. The borrowing associated with the £36 million spend would have been paid back about 48 million. That 48 million has now become 112 million. So you get this double one. We wrote to the Home Secretary. Surprisingly enough, the response back was, we've had invested in policing over many years. Yes, on a ring fence. So all the new government we get says, but what's not helpful is we don't have effective state to support that investment, and that was our narrative of the Home Secretary. It's well and good paying for police officers and associated staff. If we can't provide the infrastructure, the policing infrastructure, it's a bit of a poor value for money investment. I'm saying we're giving you money. It's a local decision as to how you prioritise, which is an interesting thing to say when we must maintain police officer numbers, PSSO numbers, police staff, and the rest of our budgets are consumed by inflation rises. So I think it's the long way of saying we will continue that dialogue because we will not be alone. There'll be every other public sector organisation. And again, it's difficult where we have an unbalanced financial plan. with most of the levers that we were previously being able to balance that plan not available to us anymore. I think that's the continuing lobbying the Commissioner does through the Associate Police Crime Commissioner, Chief does through the National Police Chief Council, I do through the CFO Society. We just got to continue because we're also on the back of uplift 10 years of disinvestment in policing. So if we'd had a state that we were able to invest in from 2010 to 2019, we would be in such a dire need now. But when we were making those savings through austerity version 1.0 from 2010, 2019, savings would be easy. We all, Chief always, and the Commissioner always want to maintain frontline policing resource and visibility. So when you look at savings, you defer capital spend, you defer maintenance programs. So it's a long way to say we are still banging that back door at government around they must identify the financial resources to maintain infrastructure for the foreseeable and achieve the impact.
Thank you. And your question is absolutely, and in my view, a response. So my submission is very clear. I'm here to deliver an operational service to keep communities safe. And the infrastructure that we need, custody, is a key element of policing. It's the cornerstone of what we do in terms of enforcement. And this has been an ongoing risk that I know what the operational need is. The affordability is the issue. What it means is we may need to undertake some short-term fixes in our current custody estate, general cost, but we need to comply with a standard, which the Home Office in terms of custody. So this is an ongoing risk, and appreciating that ongoing risk versus cash flow and opportunities for borrowing is one thing. Deferring for 2 years, and the Commissioner and Darren know my view on this. I understand we need to do that because of cash flow, but there should be an ongoing review. So if in 6 months' time we're in a position to say let's do it, we need to move at pace to make sure that we deliver this. Otherwise, we are pushing a significant problem for the operational delivery of the service down the line. And all the reasons for doing that are justified. And we work really closely together on this to try and come to a balanced view. But there is an operational risk, an operational need that is there today and needs to be constantly monitored, because waiting 10 years, waiting 4 or 5 years is going to cause a significant problem for us. That ongoing review and being able to push the button and say let's go is critical if the markets change.
If I may, and I think that's a very valid point, the flexibility that you have. I'm not sure, Darren, I agree with your analysis of interest rates and where they're going, but let's agree to disagree. But what we need to do is also, I would argue, is be ready to go. And I don't know, and I know the next question talks about the business case for GPOV. I don't want to steal that thunder. What I would argue Gwent Police needs to have is have that plan on the shelf, so that if something happens and all of a sudden interest rates fall and borrowing becomes cheaper, and we can say there's that business case, right, let's go. What is the lead time? Have we got to review everything? Have we got to wait another 12 months before that would happen? That flexibility is right, but I certainly agree with you.
To be able to go quickly.
Yeah.
So just to reassure, all of the planning, design planning, and all of the pre-construction phase is continuing.
Right.
So that there is a regular board that meets to oversee the and scrutinise the progress work, and certainly we're actively making sure that all of the design phases, so it's not on the shelf. I suppose that would be my answer. It is absolutely not on the shelf. There is a team that's working on it, that design planning, pre-planning phase. So we will be going through that process. And in fact, when the Estates Board met in the last couple of weeks to make the decision finally about the deferment, the absolute agreement was it's to view that all planning continues, so that when we are in the position to press green and go, it's all good to go. So there is no shelving it is an active.
So in my analogy means shelf, take it off the shelf, like, let's go, not gathering dust.
The pause is at the construction phase. The deferment is we will take it right the way out. And rip stage 4, sorry.
Yeah.
5 is construction, we'll
Yeah.
pause there.
You're going to answer that question. Yeah, thank you.
I think on the back of that, one of the things that the panel has raised before is about the estate strategy. And I think particularly the costs involved in GPOF and the way the GPOF design was going, there was a concern that I think we felt unaware of what it would look like, where it was going. And we've talked in the previous finance and estate sessions around this, but I think we've yet still to see the visibility of the estate strategy. There is a lack of understanding within the panel because of the visibility of that strategy to us. I think that's something that, whilst we do, it does need to be ready to go. As a panel, we need to have an understanding of what it looks like and what the business case is to be delivering that in that way. And I think that's something that we need to be addressing pretty quickly, because if you are in a position to be able to go ahead with it, as a panel, we fully want to support that, but we also need to be sure it's the right thing at the right time for the panel, for the force as well. Page 39.88 talks about the fact that the PCP's estate reference group concluded that the estate strategy is robust in terms of its vision, objectives and implementation methodology. That's not a fair statement. We actually, as a panel, we don't have that visibility of it to be able to confirm that. So that is something I think that we need to take forward as a priority.
Very short on that. So the review of the estate strategy will be concluded next month. So we've had the first draft findings. Then when the commission approves it through the state strategy board, then the new strategy, and importantly, the and the implementation plan, how those business cases drop. And it's always that delicate art of when they're into the panel, that's in the public domain. And then we just need to be mindful of what's in and what's out, because we're going through detailed planning requirements.
Yeah.
Your point is absolutely fantastically made.
We do, but if as a panel we're here talking about the precept and the budget, we can't be signing up to something that we don't know what the outcome and what the delivery is. So I think it is important that we really do address that. Councillor Easton, I'll bring you in question number 5. It sort of follows on from that quite nicely.
I think, yes, thank you, Chair. I think the last question and your comments and probably the next question are tied into the same matter. I'm the lone surviving member of the estate strategy group. There's any more this morning. I have concerns that Chair has expressed that the estate strategy group was not really aware of internal thoughts about what we're going to do with some of these properties. We supported and we developed new headquarters, but now you put £1 million forward to demolish headquarters, yet we're building in £64 million for a new facility there. Also £20 million for the firearms facility. Now the state side group weren't really aware of moving forward in the manner that it is a concern for me that we're building nearly £100 million. Weren't really planned it. We didn't really have plans for in the last 2 years. So something happened, which is the state strategy group. For HQ. I not really to £1 for the facility. And that West, South Wales and Gwent, which we better off in the middle of the after. Have you looked at collaborating with other services like the MOD, where there's a finance facility in Caldecott for MOD, and this is not being used, it's quite available. So I do have concerns about the direction we're taking, and the estate strategy group need to be fully up to brief on this, because there's a lot of money to put forward and to plan for, which you put off for a year. You've also put off the firehouse facility for another 2 years because of the pressures.
The firearms hasn't been deferred. That's the one that's still in there.
I thought it put off 2 years.
No, only the operational facility. The fact which the chief will expand upon why there's an absolute need for the joint firearms.
That's why you're supporting this thing.
But the chief will explain the key drivers on that range.
I must read that the other way around then. Okay, the only other question I want to ask is sort of related. it may come out later, because at the moment, the estate strategy group, we supported and voiced the station. We seem to have dropped the hub and spoke scheme that you were looking at ago. In terms of the estate strategy and all these things pulled together, your thoughts and plans for the estate strategy group in the near future? I think it's linked. It's got to be linked.
It is. I'll go back to the last question. When we have the revision of the estate strategy itself, because I think we brought the holistic estate strategy board to the panel group twice, probably in the last 4 years. It was last reset, I think, December 2020. I think it came here then. You presented. I think Chief presented the new presentation. So when we do the refresh now, that will be presented to the panel. The second part of your question, I think, is around the implementation plan. So the strategy will have kind of what and why, and then the implementation plan around how we deliver that will then come into this panel, and particularly the estate group. And I forgive you, because a number of these developments have been in budget papers, have been into the panel subgroup, but forgive us if we haven't brought enough attention to what we're delivering with those. So the implementation plan, you will still see our ethos of how we deliver the hub and spoke model. The police station at Abergavenny we discussed last week will be a police station with neighbourhood officers, response officers, CSOs, voluntary attendants there. It will be a police station as you see it. And I'll just pause there and see if the Chief wants to know anything else, particularly on the joint firearms unit. I think is the key conversation piece.
Yeah, if I may, Chair, just around the estate strategy and of course making sure that panel members are cited and everything. I think it's important that when we have those conversations that we talk about the aim and the ambition, but also the operational need. So I just want to make sure that there is an operational leader at those meetings alongside Dan, so that the operational need is known by the panel, not just the money. Because it's balancing everything is really important. I think that the panel understands. Two things, if I may. First of all, the Gwent Police operational hub, the GPOF that we're talking about, that is custody. Okay, so you know there are other elements to that build. So that goes back to the new discussion. When we're talking about that build, you know that is an operational hub. That is the need, the operational need for Gwent going forward. So again, it's absolutely critical that the panel understand what that stands for. It's not a building where people will just be, you know, it's not an office, back office space. This is a key operational facility that at this moment in time is a risk if we don't have significant plans in place and start delivering on them. Then the joint firearms unit work, and again, these are conversations that probably need to be undertaken within that. But this is critical. So in the last 24 hours, we've had 6 firearms incidents in Gwent alone. So that's 6 firearms teams responding to high risk in our community. That needs specialist firearms training. We then have on top of that, which is mandatory training, which isn't just once every 2 years, this is once every few months that accreditation has to be maintained. On top of that, then you have county-held specialist firearms every 2 years, and that is absolutely critical that we have training to that level, because we are a part of the firearms network across the UK. If an incident happens in London today, if an incident happens in Cardiff today, or in any other part of the UK, we overlap these as a firearms network. We're not just talking about Gwent in Wales when we talk about firearms. We are talking about UK safety and having an immediate response available to high. So if we fail, the network fails. And that means from a safety in Wales perspective, we make ourselves vulnerable. We have explored that firearms training with MOD and with other forces. problem we have is that we're talking about not just Gwent firearms officers, we're talking about South Wales and Devon Powys Police, so 3 forces coming together for that regular training. The situation that we would find ourselves if we come another force and the MOD is that we would only have availability for training when they didn't need that facility. Now, I actually think public safety is more important than that. And we've looked at the operational need. The facility that we currently have is disgraceful. And I know commissioners recently visited. It's not fit for purpose. We want to keep Wales and the UK safe. We need to have people who are specialists in firearms deployment. They're not just deployed to deal with people with guns. We are deployed to deal with people with weapons. They are deployed to deal with people walking down our streets carrying machetes, knives, domestic incidents involving. Remember that our local officers are not armed, but therefore they may be the initial responders with baton, taser, and firearm that they and ASP, but they will need firearms back going into a hazardous situation. So, without question, that need is there because it keeps Wales and the United Kingdom safe. And that's why we need a facility that we can actually say, hand on heart, that our firearms officers will be trained. Only imagine if we don't get that training right and somebody is shot, then once again, Pam Kelly will be held to account as to why her officers were not trained to the national standard. So it is difficult, it is financially a strain, but it's an absolute must if we want to keep our communities safe.
Just very quickly, yes, the Chief is quite right. I visited in the last few weeks the Waterton site, currently houses the and it's well, I say it's not for purposes for largely, and we do definitely need to create something new. Some aspects are sensitive. I'm not going to say much more about those issues, but on the issue of sharing with the military, one of the problems is the caliber of bullets that are used, and the ability of what's called the bullet catcher, which isn't a person, to actually stop the bullets without being damaged. So there are, very interesting to be told this. Just in terms of what firearms officers do, and it is a tri-service venture, so it depends on all of us agreeing the costs finally and going forward together. The two, you may remember that the 2 out-of-control dogs in Penrall, they were shot. The actual duties is wide and ranging, and I'll leave it there, Chair.
Yeah. Thank you. That's just one further question. You built in £1 million demolition of the old HQ. Are you going to demolish it?
Page 76 talks about the impact of delays to the emergency services network. We had a WLGA meeting chaired last week. It talked about potential delays actually now to 2930. Well, if it ever actually transpires, I mean, we've been talking years in the process now. I mean, obviously that has an impact on yourselves. You know, it's a key tool, yes, for your officers. They can't work without it. What's the financial impact for yourselves in terms of that delay? Page 17 refers about some funding to cover the implications. What impact has that funding had against the implications that you've got? Of course.
There's 3 bits in this. The first is the original ESM business case was predicated on delivering national savings.
Yeah.
So over and above, so you'd have an improved product at a cheaper price versus our current delivery system. So there's efficiency. That macro saving has eroded over the years. So I'm close to. So to the point, I think it's actually a cost neutral investment. So you just get the productivity and the operational de-risk. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Is it may cost the same or more. So there's that piece. It's been running at a pace since about 2016 when we were looking at implementation. So we've had teams or other forces in other regions have had teams stood up in anticipation of the transition. And at not inconsiderable cost to those. We are very fortunate in Gwent that Gwent and South Wales have invested over many years, as you know, in our digital services division. So we already have a result. We don't have to stand up separately for that. Okay. So a letter off the Chief Constable lead standard down the implementation teams. We absorb that work into our business as usual digital services, so it doesn't impact there. The third bit is around the affordability. So we have prudently set about in Gwent setting a sinking fund for transition. The last figures I was dealing with, we were looking at about a £6 million cost of transition by the time you replace, those for your radios and the cars and the extenders, etc. So we'd set up a sinking fund so we wouldn't have to borrow against transition, because the risk of borrowing around ESN when you borrow long term, ESN transition, it will last 25 years. So the impact of the delay, and you'll strip the fact of the papers today, I'm utilising that sinking fund, that ESN sinking fund, so I think it's going to go off until the end of the decade as you mention it, to offset borrowing today. So it's a countering set aside money for a specific thing that you don't want to touch. But faced with the complete, they got the active components on the joint firearms unit, advice would be I will use that ESN reserve. May need to come up in 6-7 years time to offset borrowing today. Intuitive for me, but actually financially it makes sense because I'm deferring borrowing. I don't know what borrowing will be like in 10 years time, and like, so those are the three sort of key bits for me.
So from an operational point of view, the delivery of the using the digital services work you're doing to develop and maintain your communications network. It's a risk. It's a risk that is acceptable.
It's continually being monitored. The beauty of having that joint team is that we are continually looking at maintenance, continually looking at sustainability, but also innovation. So this moment in time, we're managing that risk because there is a national cost that's meeting that risk to keep us afloat, which is significant across policing and of course other agencies as well. And the issue for try and get ahead of the curve around innovation, so that we can feed our own learning into that national picture as well, around the technology that's available and that we use. So it's an ever-changing risk, it's an ever-changing evolution as it were around technology, but we are working together in the UK to mitigate that risk. So it's not just owned by myself.
I can add that it is a national issue. We had a report of the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners General Meeting, which was Wednesday and Thursday this week, which I attended, on the police digital services, and this was part of member of the board of
just going that out, well, it does again amplify the collaborative nature of how local forces and regions in and dovetailing with the national picture. So the one key risk around ESN transition being delayed is the airwave radios and the supply chain of that. So you appreciate, with the old technology, there's a workshop where you can just take them apart and and build them back up. So police digital services then on behalf of all forces that we are an active member of, and they took that purchasing, so they work directly with the manufacturer to ensure that we have surety of supply. That's the big risk, is with the old technology, will they decommission it? And then we need to maintain 124,000 police officers worth of handsets. Years. And similarly, the infrastructure, the master infrastructure, the airways that we maintain. So that was a very good example of collectively how policing de-risked local risk. So very important aspect. Thank you very much.
Councillor Jack Dawson.
It was about unrecoverable secondment income.
Page 99, wasn't it?
Yes, page 99.
So we are able to second end officers and police staff off to other organisations, and there's a set rate by which we can recover costs. Not every police officer deployment to another force you are able to attract them. So that we would second, I won't name names, but it was an officer. We thought we'd receive this salary back in, we didn't, which is an honest showing of a reduction in income, of seconded income. I mean, the totality of seconded officers is probably 700,000 a year, and everybody's seconded officers. So it's not a detriment of when we give our officers of everybody seconded back and forth to each other, depending on skill sets or operational gaps, etc. So we budget about 700,000 for seconded officer income every year. This was one we put in, we thought we would get income back. We did. In spirit of absolute transparency, we showed that as a
We benefit from that system. We get officers from other. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Easton, you had a question on page 99 as well?
Yeah, just a brief question. I noticed we've had the HQ built, but we've got added costs now to the HQ on this, on more SRS costs, more. Also, after that, we've got the 190,000. And with SRS, we get S value money from SRS and have improvements we need to make in HQ after we built the HQ.
So there's two bits in there. So when we built the HQ, we took the opportunity at that time to rationalise our storage and data centre. So when we built the HQ, the original ICT strategy got changed quite appropriately to de-risk any future direction of travel around hard storage, about cloud storage, and bring the data centre into HQ. So as we've stepped through that and invested in HQ, there's the last piece of cost jigsaw that we needed when we built the security and data centre into our new HQ build. We're going to, along with SRS partners, we are decommissioning the Blaenavon data centre, as you know. Then equally, it's all perfect in this timing, isn't it? When you're in a collaborative agreement with all other organisations, be it local authority or the police forces, they're all finalising their budgets at the same time. So we're all up against, so that additional SRS resource came through late in the day around additional costs that we have the budget for next year. So the important question you ask is, do we see the value in our collaboration with SRS? I do agree with that. We have a hybrid approach to our ICT support. So we have our SRS integration for your kind of standardized systems, you know, your Office 365, etc. We have the digital services division along the south. When the national programs of work come down, we do effectively risk, we get value for money. We do things once for two forces. So we have SRS, we have DSD, just get the acronyms in. We also work with Police Digital Services, which is a wholly owned company owned by commissioners who act as a intelligent client with the ICT community, the private ICT community, back into policing. And then you also have the fourth bit, Home Office major technology programs, who develop the major technology pieces, thinking about your replacement for your Police National Database or Police National Computer, but then filtered down. So because we have this hybrid approach, I think we de-risk and get huge value for money. And the test for me, I always go back. If you cast your mind back to COVID, when we all went into lockdown in March 20, we did just a beat by going all in the office, all at home, laptops working, didn't miss a beat. 101 calls from home, 3 different control rooms for resilience, so we could quarantine. And that was all down to that investment in ICT. We had forces ringing us up saying, "Can you give us their laptops? And do you know, use Zoom?" It was like, you know, that's how we went bang, 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 and I see that investment every day. And we are, I put Gwent at the vanguard of delivering policing technology improvements nationally. Whenever you see a map of the UK around deployment of ICT, you've always seen Gwent as the green, ahead of the curve. And I think that's only by virtue of our collaboration and the investment we see. I mean, the global ICT budget, £6 million, £3 million, not inconsiderate.
Why it was, I can remember, that and rebuilt, one of possibly 3 linked, big future-proof. All of a sudden, it ain't future-proof, it may still be bomb-proof. So I suppose the answer is technology moving on, we doesn't move.
Councillor, do you want to take up questions 11 and 12?
Could you provide details of how telematic equipment in 103 was not, yeah, 103, sorry.
103, yeah, so the telematics. So this will send lifetime data of the utilisation and direction of that vehicle. So at a very simple level, and it also records service intervals, etc., etc. So at a very basic level, we will know the utilisation of our assets. So if a vehicle hasn't turned a wheel in 3 weeks in a car park, we will know that. Car is being utilised considerably. We're always on the road. We will then be able to bring that into maintenance before it breaks down. So we'll acknowledge that it's done, 20,000 miles this year. Let's get it in, etc., etc. Key productivity piece, we can map that. So it's not just what we call telematics in the vehicle, but also with officers. So patrol routes. So we will know when local councils talk about ASP hotspots, we will have that lifetime data that will say, well, we know officer so-and-so was in that locality for this time of day, etc., etc. We've got significant cashable pieces around utilisation of our assets. It also has improved data around our driving training. So we will have individuals who we know may drive in a different manner to others, and we may want to take that into account. So it's across the piece, but I think fundamentally the saving is around productivity and knowing where assets are being used and officers and staff in those assets, and ensuring that at the local level, deployment plans, briefing plans on a daily basis are adhered to and delivered.
Add to that, it's still a new technology for us, so really making sure that we use it effectively so that we can evidence those efficiencies is really important. There's a tool that will help us drive effectiveness and efficiency. Have we got our people in the right place where our communities want them to be? And we can check and test that. And have we got, and are we using our people resource efficiently and effectively? And of course, have we got our assets, our vehicles in the right places and being used in the right way? So that we can make sure our vehicles are where they need to be, the type of vehicles that we need are where they need to be, so that all of our resources and the effectiveness and efficiency of them, we can evidence that, which I think is really important at this moment in time, when every penny of everything matters. And it's a tool that we can use to make sure we can demonstrate efficiency.
Can you elaborate capital charge under expenditure?
Capital charge. So capital charge is not designed for borrowing. If you notice on this one, the spend is very low. So when we put the provision in last year for borrowing, we didn't take up borrowing. So whenever I talk about capital charges, I've got 2 facets. Borrow, I've got to repay the principal, that's a loan, and I've got to pay interest off the primary part. Also, within accounting, so not so much on the, when you look at the technical accounts, we also need to set aside a capital charge for finance lease liabilities. So leases that we have, that we don't actually own, but we have the risks and rewards for. So we've got to recognise that. But the purpose of your question on this, the capital charge, the budget that we set aside for borrowing and repayment of principal and interest, but we never took on the borrowing last year. It rolled forward into the 11 million that we're looking for in the next 23-24.
One technical one. On your management of the finances throughout the year, how often do you review your performance? Monthly basis, weekly basis, quarterly basis?
Quarterly, Q1, 2, 3, 4. So what we would normally do, we used to do monthly, because essentially 1 month in. Then we opted for quarterly. So quarterly is formally reported, but finance do monthly and report it to Nigel. Any discrepancy. So when we report it to the Commissioner and Chief on a quarterly basis, so we go, you know, period 6 Q2, period 7, just after reported, we will report that back.
To say if you've got an adverse trend variance, you report to you so we don't get to quarter 6, or sorry, H2, sorry, 6 months in, something started in month 4 and went through 4, 5 and 6 and suddenly fell adrift here.
Yeah, so I have monthly one-to-ones as the 4 CFO does with the head of finance. Agenda will be monthly reporting, where are we, any major divergences from the last 4 reports.
And reversing that, the positivity of trending, which might help you in your case goals and starting the project early. So thank you.
In fact, my chief officer team reporting on a quarterly basis, and in fact, Darren, I think it's next week, you and I are do a discussion.
If I may, Chair, just on that we sat on these fortnightly meetings on that, so you would have seen media quite recently, 2 murder investigations where we've had some good sentences for difficult murder investigations that we've investigated here at Gwent. Murder investigations are terrible, awful, dreadful for family members and communities. The cost of a murder is also significant. So you can't plan for everything. You know, there could be dealing with COVID pandemic, we have a significant number of protests. So that means that we need to respond to protest, often that cancelling of arrest days, overtime. And so building in that buffer into our financial management around operational need is really important, because it isn't just about some of the stuff that's, you know, around laptops, other costs, the unexpected operational costs, which sometimes cause us issues which we need to monitor on a regular basis.
Thank you very much.
I don't remember where I read it, but how long have you been applying social value?
8 years.
And at what level did you use?
Well, in any evaluation, so when we do 10% social value, and we have at least monthly, so when you have a contract review meeting, because they've said that their scores on that, we hold them to account. So I think it's still, if I'm honest, it's still embryonic, and I think it's embryonic-wise and organisation-wise. Becoming more before, we certainly pick it up significantly in our office with a lot of our grants, although not contractual social value. It's certainly a key aspect when we're awarding grants and commissioning services. We very much focus on the social value aspect, and we do monitor that monthly in those review meetings. And I think the reporting piece, we probably need a bit more work on how you report back in the real benefits for social values. I think so. I still think there's if I'm honest, there's still refinement needed on how we report it back in. We ask the right questions, we realise the right outcomes at the end from that aspect. It's been well rolled out within our procurement commission within both organisations.
Yes, there's a commissioner-owned company called Blue Light Commercial, which seeks to do major purchasing on behalf of boards and other. And they accept value as an important part of their approach to purchasing, wherever it is. To do so, clearly that there have to be limits on that, and I know that will be the case because I was the board member that advocated the criteria that they apply.
Panel's questions. And about yourself, Commissioner, do you have any final points that you or your panel would like to respond to before we adjourn to discuss?
I did say I'm very pleased with the discussion and the response you had, but I did ask if it would be all right, first of all, to allow the chief to maybe reflect on anything else if she wishes, and then likewise Darren, and then we'll.
Thank you, Anne, for your questions and your interest. I think it's really positive, in all honesty, to have that engagement and scrutiny, and quite rightly so. I went through a presentation with you only a few months ago, and I want to say today formally, and this is formally, is that, you know, the budget that the Commissioner has put in of 6.82 is an honest budget, but it is also a challenging one for myself. And because we talk about numbers and themes here, it's myself and my officers that have to operationalise this budget. And without question, I could not provide us with anything less. Even with this amount of money, we're going to have to save a significant amount of money because we cannot keep dipping into reserves. It's a short-term approach to managing the budget. I've already looked at our budgets and saved a significant amount, which is in the papers. If we are to maintain our establishment for police officers and police staff, it's absolutely the right thing to do to deliver a service. We are starting to fall short of other areas where we can make savings. And although today is about this financial year, the very short term, think to the next financial year. And I already know that I have to look at about £2.5 million worth of savings next year. So I think short-termism and just looking at the budget for this year is something which we should look at with caution. And I appreciate it's very, very difficult for our communities at the moment. I think it is an honest budget, but it is a short-term budget. I am concerned about what, you know, a 2-year budget could now looks like for policing, because it puts us under huge pressure. And if I am to keep communities safe, I need the budget in order to deliver that. So anything less than the budget that's been put before us today makes it very difficult, almost impossible to deliver the service. And even with this budget, it is putting me in a very difficult position, except, you know, where the community and where households are at the moment. But I will ask you to look into next year, and I will ask you to already start thinking about the latter part of this financial year, because we do have some risks that we're going to manage, that we're going to need to manage. So those levers, whether it be, you know, with Home Office, and all that realisation that if we are going to maintain the establishment of Gwent Police in terms of our police officers and police staff, then we will, without question, need to look at precept increases over the next few years. And it concerns me that we are looking at this budget over a short-term period, understanding the cost of living crisis that we have. But the Gwent Police Operational Hub, and of course the costs that are going to be coming on this year that we perhaps are unable to account for, are going to put my budget under even more pressure. I want Gwent to be one of the safest places for you to live, your families to live. And I also think that if a community is safe, businesses invest in safe communities. So a budget that is less than what the Commissioner is tabling today, in my view, and I would like it formally recorded, puts me in an impossible. And it already places me in a significant challenge for this financial year. And I would ask you as a panel to stay to the latter part of next year, because we have significant challenges ahead of us as communities. As a leader of a public service that I'm very proud of, I want to be able to do my best for you and to do. So I will ask you to think very carefully about your observations and considerations today, but I would like it formally recorded that anything less than the budget that has been tabled would be very difficult for me to maintain a service, and that there is a short-term and a long-term challenge that myself and my colleagues are going to need to work with in order to try and balance. I have a statutory obligation to do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Chief. All key headings. Funding, first of all. grant we get off government, or ring fenced. Totally inadequate to fund pay award, inflation, interest, any of the other needs or absolutes that we need in the budget. So we go back 13 years, we get the same amount of money today off government as we did 13. Cash the same figure. We're building inflation for the real term, 25% less than that in government, 25%. That's what we're ended with. Is the other key aspect of funding. We've talked from the people we asked in an online surveys supported a uplift of at least 50. Proposal today is £20.72 or to the average band B household. And I think it's important with local authority members, if we talk a like-for-like percentage increase, so we talk about 6.82 for the commissioner, raises £20.72 a year. 6.82 for a local average local authority, where it would be about £80, is a 4-to-1 ratio. Cash amount is 4 times more for a local authority than the commissioner. Proposal today, without breaching confidence, based on my intelligence, we will be the third highest in the list. So at least 2 commissioners going higher, maybe. And against local authorities, I think there's probably at least 2 local authorities maybe going higher than us in their percentages. I think what the cash is 4 times more. So I think there's a contextual piece there. If we talk about expenditure, there's been nearly £14 million worth of growth in expenditure between 2 financial years, all non-discretionary. It's pay award, it's inflation, those aspects, it's interest rate rises. We can't touch it. And remember, in that growth are 10 extra CSOs that we're committed to. That's a key part of that growth. But that's £14 million difference in budgets that we've scrutinised today, that are highlighted. There are non-discretionary. It's not, the Commissioner mentioned, not a wish list, it's a must list. We can't go back on any of those growth areas. We would normally, that creates a financial gap. We would normally look at efficiencies. In austerity 2010 to 2019, we took 350 police officers out of policing in Gwent, which we've now reinstated back up to those levels. But those are some of the levers we could pull to balance the books every year. We can't do that now. If we reduce police officer numbers, the money goes with it. The Home Office will not let us. PCSOs we can't touch. Police staff we don't want to touch. On-pay budgets are all significantly driven by inflationary increases. So our efficiency lever is jammed solid. And that's the backdrop of Gwent Police delivered nearly £54 million of cash flow savings in the last 13 years. If we hadn't done that, our budget would be £54 million higher today. We've done that to balance the books and reinvest in policing. So the last bit is sort of context around how do we make up that growth in expenditure. Our ask today is to meet that with 35% of that deficit, 35% of that 14 million is a preset increase. Only a third we're asking in preset. 27% of how we bridge that gap is savings, cash reductions, most of which have already been banked, but we've still got an efficiency plan to deliver another £1 million yet this year. A quarter of that deficit, we've got to put in, we can stick a plaster on, we've got to use reserves. You can use them once. Reserves are already being depleted through the capital programme spend, etc. And I know we've had a long debate about that today, but you spend them once, you would never use your savings to offset your salary shortfall every month. It's not sustainable. And 13% of that shortfall is government grants. You can see the way that the government grant is piecing together. Well, I think the Chief has clearly outlined that anything short of the ask today, the ask today does not balance the books. The ask today still mandates the Chief deliver another £1 million of the savings, and then we've got to put £3.5 million into the budget, non-recovery to cover it. So there's a £4.6 million gap when you think about it, just with this preset increase. So anything less, there's nowhere to go. It just adds to the bottom line, and it adds to how can we square a circle? We can't make any savings. And the Chief is quite right to say, and I think this is the most important bit, is the context of policing is around kind of Gwent PLC. a safe, secure society will deliver that economic growth that all the local authorities are compelled to and want to deliver. People will invest if it's safe to move and work in Gwent. And she was right to point out that we are just at the start of austerity, 2.0 if you will, that there's a £21 million gap at the end of the MTFP. So we put a stick and plaster on this year, next year. The important piece, any reduction in precept is a reduction forever throughout that plan. We don't get it this year, we don't get it next year, we don't also get the compounding increase as well through future increases and base movements. So please put an eye onto the bottom right hand corner of appendix 1B that says £21 million, and we only have plans for about 4 million. So our gross is about 25 million, plans for about 21 cap.
Thank you very much. Just before we withdraw, can I first of all thank you for the scrutiny today? I think it's really thorough, really pertinent. And let me repeat the assurance that I've given you that we're ready to work with you in terms of how we make good future presentations and how we can get that and stronger. I also want to give you the assurance, which I mentioned, that together with my colleagues, other PCCs across England and Wales, we will continue to lobby the Secretary to increase the policing grant going forward so that the added financial burden on local council taxpayers can be minimised in the future. But that's a matter that all to do there is our case. So with that, Chair, if you want us to withdraw.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question? Oh, Darren, sorry. 1% rise in precept is worth how much?
About 700k.
711. Yeah.
So 1% either way, about 700.
If you're like dipping into your reserves now, and each year, you know, the budget that you will use increasing, how are you going to cover, you know, how is the reserve going to be built up again?
They will, and I think that's the risk. That's the risk. The only way reserves get bolstered is you sell an asset, which we've rationalised our estate to the proper level, or out of your in-year budget you save some money. And the problem we've got going forward is during austerity, when we had a huge efficiency program, when we're saving that £54 million over the last 13 years, sometimes in a year you accelerate an efficiency scheme, so you did underspend. So people who sat on this panel before would have seen us underspending on budget in a year because you've accelerated the efficiency scheme, and that would go into a reserve. Now we've got no levers on efficiency. We can't find efficiency because we're at 80% of our budget is staff. The Home Officers and the vast majority of that 80% is police officers. Not that you would ever wish to reduce the police officer establishment, but during austerity we had no choice. The Home Office said you cannot reduce the police officer establishment, so I can't go and find that money. So it's a double whammy. I've got to use the reserves that are already really low and needed for other prime investment things or to cover other risks. I've got low reserves that I've then got to use to fill a budgetary gap with no hope that I'll be able to replace that because the budgetary gap is forecasting overspend for the future. It's a triple whammy. I've done this for 17 years, and this is the most difficult year I've had in trying to see a plan out of this. Not to say that the Chief Constable is already ahead of the curve, the Deputy Chief Constable and the Assistant Chief Officer Resources are already heavily involved in productivity efficiency group and looking at those future savings plans. Very difficult where most of your budget is ring fence, you cannot touch for efficiency. You actually hit the nail on the head there, Councillor.
And it's on an email, so Darren Garwood passed.
Yeah. I'm sort of a poster. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you then. So I think that draws our questions to a close. I'd like to thank you for the responses to the questions you've given us. I'll ask you to withdraw from the meeting now if you would, and we'll just take a couple of minutes to take a comfort break, grab some refreshments, and we'll formally the question. Thank you all for joining the meeting and allowing us the opportunity to consider the papers put before us today. So the panel have had a discussion and we've considered the report and the responses from the Chief Constable and the officers of the PCC today. We recognise the difficult environment in which the force continues to operate, and we would like to recall the fact that we do have concerns over the use of reserves to offset a funding gap. We appreciate this is the situation you're in, but that does cause us some concern that we are eating into those reserves. Ultimately, the panel feels the proposed precept of 6.8.2% is acceptable. I would now ask the panel members, I'd like somebody to move their recommendation. Thank you. I'd like to leave a second. Thank you. And could all in favour through a show of hands, please? Very much.
Unanimous.
That's unanimous. Commissioner, would you like to make any final comment on before we move on to the next agenda item?
Thank you very much. Yes, it was just to say we're very pleased to have your agreement. We do note the issue of the use of reserves. It's something we're very conscious of. And we've given certainly assurances of our understanding, to Darren in particular. I would like to thank my team and Gwent Police, because this is a team effort, very much so. And very grateful that you've accepted the recommendation of the bid that we've made. And we will, of course, as I've said, undertake to review the procedures involved to see what improvements can be made within constraints that we are not in control of. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 6, Gwent Police and Crime Panel Independent Cooperative Member. I'll turn it over to Claire.
Thank you, Chair. As members have noted at the last meeting, we were notified that Mr Peter Nuttall has decided sadly to resign his position as an independent member. The process requires us to advertise for a replacement for Mr Nuttall because the term of office runs out next year in October. What we normally do is appoint an interview panel, a selection panel. That's normally made up of the chair and the vice chair and an additional member from the police and crime panel. So what I'm seeking today is if I can have somebody who's willing to join the interview panel to do the shortlisting and interviewing for the replacement independent member.
Just one position.
Just one member, yeah, because the chair and vice chair.
You nominate or take volunteers?
Take volunteers, nominate.
I will take it.
Marina? Okay. Is everyone happy with any other nominations? Everyone agree with that?
I'd be happy to stand, but
I mean, if I could take a reserve, so if somebody can't make it, that would be great, Tony, if you could do that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Agenda item 7 is the board programme.
Yeah, the next meeting of the panel is the 31st of March 2023. You see we've added in some items that we discussed at the last meeting. We were going to have a presentation from Gwent Police and the Commissioners, professionals on the police team on the professional standards and complaints procedure. So we can have an explanation of how it works in Gwent Police and then how the review process works in the Commissioner's office, for members to understand how the complaints process works. I've asked them to try and do it for 30 minutes. It's quite a complex thing, and after 30 minutes is about the maximum for a presentation to allow time for questioning. We have made a start on the victim support chat and Facebook members. One the group I have sent through the document, setting out a methodology. So if I could have comments back on that, and we can start making a start on that work. And I'd just give a verbal update at that meeting. And we had a request for a road traffic accident information item. So it'll be on the agenda, but not for discussion. It's just for information as requested by Councillor Chapman Dawson. And then the next meeting after that will be the 23rd of June. Thank you.
And obviously the estate strategy is something that we've discussed and there's quite a lot on the March meeting, isn't it, already? Whether that would be something that we could bring to the big meeting. That's not going to stop any financial estates subject meetings, but would that be something we could possibly table for the 23rd of June, do you think? We've got performance quarter 3 on the 31st of March as well. I wonder if it would be possible to have an update with Sam prior to that, because we've had the information report. But I think there was a few areas that we're looking for development on, so if we could have an update at performance before that, that would be appreciated. Any other suggestions for future agenda items?
Could I just say, Chair, we are keen to introduce you to our new Deputy Chief Constable as well. We can find some way of doing that.
Right, yeah.
We have asked us to for that meeting if that's
That's
appropriate.
That's great. No further comments? Okay, in that case, everybody needs to propose. Thank you everybody for your time and attendance and consideration today. It's much appreciated. And we'll see you in the next meeting on the 1st of March. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.